through a crisis, how can establishing accountability ensure decision-making success?
Well, I think more than ever in a crisis where you need to show accountability, especially on leadership, it's about making decisions faster than ever. I think one of the most important criteria now in the crisis is what do we stop doing right now and what do we continue? How do we stop the fire? How do we start getting rebuilding the organization? And this is mostly up to the heads and the hands of the leaders. So I think more than ever, accountability is a key for success. You can delegate many things, and when normal times are there, yes, delegate as much as you want. You still be as a leader accountable. But today, the big decisions, I think Jeff Bezos talks about decisions 1 and decisions type 2. One are the big ones, the bold ones, the difficult. That's the ones he and the executive team. Decisions number 2, the easy ones, the ones you can delegate. Anybody can do that. Today, about the crisis, it's mostly about decisions type 1, which is the important ones. That's where you have really to push accountability upwards, and those people need to take the decisions, and if not, step down and let other people do that.
That's wonderful. So tell me more about governance and how it can ensure stability through a crisis.
Well, governance has been used many, many times. It's a word that, we love to use, and often we don't know really what it means. I think it's very closely linked to accountability, and the governance is where the accountability lies. And I would go back to the same question. Accountability today stays at the top of the organization. These are, where are we going to land the plane that has one engine only? Is it going to be in the Hudson River or not? These things you cannot leave to many governance committees, or it's a question of 1 or 2 people, maybe 3, maybe the executive team to take those decisions. So governance is about accountability in the broader sense for the organization. And again, like before, more than ever, that governance is at the top of the organization.
Do you find that it's like peeking behind the curtain when a company is in a crisis or a situation, which is, I think, through COVID, it's been an extended crisis where a team becomes aware of a weak link in the C-suite?
Absolutely. I think you can drag along. You can take credit from others' people's work. We've seen how leadership has been, severely hit because of bad leadership habits, selfishness, and playing with values. And I think the crisis just takes this off. You can see really who's playing the game, who's playing fairly the rain according to the rules, who's just dragging along and just using other people to shine. I think the crisis, that's one of the good things, even if most of them are painful, is that you cannot hide anymore. It's really about taking those decisions that will, I talk about 3 types of projects that companies need to take care. First, decide what you're going to stop. We need resources. Second, how are we going to keep our business running? And third, at the same time, these things happen at the same time in a matter of weeks, is how are we going to rebuild our business? What's the new business model that we want to go for? So in the past, you could do this sequentially, 1, 2, 3. Now it's all at the same time. And you cannot run away from that because your company will sink very, very quickly.
Well, and I agree with you in you were talking about making quick decisions, that it's not about thoughtful necessarily. It's really about, you have to have the gut level experience to make it quick right now. And if you've been limping along or you don't have the ability to be decisive in a moment, that it's crippling organizations.
Absolutely, Janice. You always heard when you study business schools that you need to take decisions based on facts and data, or a big part of decision making is part of that. But what kind of data do you use in a crisis, especially in a crisis like COVID, that nobody has a clue how the next month is going to look like? So like you say, Janice, it's mostly about gut feeling. It's about your experience. It's about the experience of a few people in the organization who have the courage to listen to their guts. And of course, you always want to test slightly your ideas. You don't want to jump on them straight away, but test them with your key customer or your key partner or some of your key employees. Does this make sense? Does it resonate? Can be this the way forward? And if yes, go for it. You cannot waste any time. So yes, definitely agree with the analogy and the reference of making decision faster today based on mostly gut feeling.
That's really interesting. You know, the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about that is that there are huge rewards that can come to an organization in a crisis. Can you speak to that also and some of the advantages?
Yeah, I think the rewards is the first mover advantage, I think, becomes more obvious in these kind of situations. If you're the first one to step into that direction, that's the right one. You'll just take over most of the clients. You can see that with education and the business schools, or where they've been hesitant to become digital for years. For years, they said no, teaching has to be presential. And those business schools who made the leap, and I knew a few, one in Madrid, for example, Instituto de Empresa, leading top business school, they had made the move already. They didn't go it full, but they were ready. They were ready after a week. Most of them struggled. So definitely, I think that's one of the advantages as well, is that when you go for the right direction, you will take over, because first mover advantage plays a much bigger role in a crisis, especially in the one that we're seeing today with so much uncertainty. I think people want something safe. Maybe it's not the best, but it works. So let's go for that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Tell me, this is one of the questions that another member of my team wanted to ask you. I find this really interesting. So if you see the coronavirus response over the last 6 months as a project that you would put through your system, where have a lot of world governments succeeded or failed?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I never thought about like that to the coronavirus crisis, but it just opened up an idea to me. So definitely an article to write about that. And I think the point is that governments have approached the coronavirus project in a very, very different way. Some of them use kind of more fundamental projects techniques. They really assess the implications much better. I think if you look at New Zealand and the leading countries, they were very disciplined. Also, something that we need in project is when you decide the rules, where you're going, what's the goal, you're disciplined in the implementation, you're ruthless in the implementation. And you could see that maybe we didn't know where the project was going, but people felt like this was the right way. The countries that approached the project in a more agile way, agile with changes constantly, I think they have suffered the most. They have, because at any reaction, any new piece of information, they were shifting the project to a different approach, new rules, and that confused so many people. I can talk about Spain, the UK, of course, the US, where the rules have been changing. So I think actually it's a great point. I do think that the countries that took the coronavirus crisis as a proper project with a goal and a vision and some rules and some milestones, they did much better than the more agile approach.
You know, I love that you just said that, because it made me immediately think of the application of employees and what we feel as employees in organizations, that there's a moving target for the goal all the time, and that we never know exactly what to expect from leaders. So that has its ramifications on the outcome of anything we apply ourselves to, right, as an organization.
Right. Yeah, it has consequences on business, on self-employed, on public sector. If the rules, the basic rules, we're not going to control everything, are not clear, then it has crazy implications on the business, for sure. Thank you. Good observation Janice. I like the question. It's I'm already thinking about the article.
Good, good. It might be a whole nother series or another book.
Yeah.
You should maybe write an ebook about that, because I do think from a corporation standpoint, if you look at different examples of how corporations have walked through it as a project, the same rules apply, and it exposed a lot of things within an organization structurally. And I like what you just pointed out about discipline, because that leads into accountability. So speak to a little bit more about discipline and what that has been revealed through a crisis.
Well, I think we were in prior to the crisis, we were in a world where discipline was a bad word. It came from the army, and people, of course, didn't see very well the army and the hierarchy, and which, of course, led to bureaucracy and things that we don't like, of course, clear. But discipline was one of these terms like leadership, which was just not considered, not respected. It's why do we need discipline? We're all creative people. And I do think that when you talk about implementation of projects or strategies or changes, you do need to have some discipline in the sense of, well, we've decided that's the way. We're not sure that's the way, but that's what we've decided. At least 80% we're sure that that's where we want to go. And this is the business model we want to build. And if people start questioning all the time where you're going again and again and again, and turning into decisions that were made, that's for me a lack of discipline. Discipline is about respecting the way you're going forward with the business, with all the consequences, and then following the basic rules, the values that you set up, the culture that you want. So if people start challenging not just the vision and direction, but how you function, and no, we want to be autonomous teams, and that doesn't work in a crisis where you need to be united. So I think you see that from the army. There's a reason why discipline is so important, is because it gives you fast speed reaction as a team, as a big organization. That's what you want to beat your competition. So I totally agree that those organizations who had this in mind implemented their strategies in a disciplined approach have been more successful, for sure.
I want you to touch on one more point, because I could keep asking you more questions as you answer. It's very interesting in that you just indicated another reveal that can happen in a crisis, which is implementing projects in real time outside of a crisis also depends on the stability of culture and the stability of the environment in which you want to drive the car on what road, right? So the same thing happens in a crisis. If the culture is uneven, or it's inconsistent, or the values in which the corporation wants to carry those projects out are vague, that can be very confusing and really impact the project and its outcome.
Absolutely. Yes, I think there's no cohesion, there's no alignment. I think those are ramifications that in the crisis, like you said before, they become more relevant and are crucial. In a stable situation, basically there was no stable situation before the crisis. It was still a change in a very fast changing world, but everything has just accelerated. It's fundamental to have that body of culture that sustain maybe a business which is in constant change. You still need to have some foundations, and culture is one of them. Values is one of the other. Some kind of strong decision making, empowering people, respecting employees, and being generous with them. These are the pillars that you have to have. Otherwise, that mass, that entity will not sustain in the midterm or even in the short term. So absolutely, I think even in a more stable world, you need those pillars. And if they're not, then it will not last for long.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. And now I just thought of one more final question.
Go ahead. I still have a bit of time. I love it.
So you were touching on discipline, and it was one of the other questions we had, but it's really about identifying scope, and scope creep is what I would call it. So when you're trying to stay the course and stay focused, when you've assessed a strategy, how do you keep from it bleeding sideways or up and down, especially in a crisis where you're managing fires and trying to be flexible and agile? How do you remain on course?
I love the question. I think all the questions are on point, Janice, because they're the most challenging parts in the crisis. And we all know if you manage projects, the initial scope, what you want to build, the requirements, they will change. The world changes, and it's fair that they change. But I think the way you approach changes to your scope and to your plan determines the success. And I think it's good to keep an eye and sometimes accept this scope change. But what I always say is, please stay on scope, stay on scope. If we find things that we need to change, we create a mini project on the site and we'll cover that, maybe cover that in a second phase. Or if we have the resources, the capacity, as soon as we finish that project, which is about sustaining our clients, we move that in that. So you still can increase your scope, but do it in a disciplined manner, in a rational way, where you assess that you have the capacity. If you don't make those decisions rationally, saying, well, the capacity that you have in your business is limited. That's one of the things that leaders don't understand. You cannot throw in more and more projects without stopping projects. So if you don't manage your scope in a smart way, meaning we'll change it, but let's do phase 2B. And we'll include that part later on. And if we can, we'll do it first. But let's focus 90% on what we agreed before, so that we finish. We need to finish things in order to keep building. And this is a sickness that you see in most of the business. They never finish projects because they keep expanding, and they turn it into operations. They just sack resources and budgets. So again, back to the crisis, this is something that if you don't do right, you risk severely failure. If you do it right, you will succeed.
That's really a great answer. And I can't wait for you to write this bigger article about the coronavirus as a project. Yeah. Well, I really did enjoy your book, and I've enjoyed getting to meet you, and I'm excited that I get to continue meeting you. You've started my brain off very early thinking, so thank you.
Okay. Wow.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Janice.